What's up, everyone? My name is Charlie Krushik, and I am the founder of Lone Strike Studios, my personal photography website. This is going to be the start to a series that I'm going to try and actually get really going over the last couple weeks of the summer and into the fall. It's going to be a series where I'm going to be showing you how to edit my photos or how to edit using my presets that I have provided. It's definitely going to be a work in the progress because I'm not used to being one that's going to be getting filmed. I'm used to be the one behind the camera taking the pictures, so it's definitely different than what I'm really used to, but it's worth a shot and I'm really excited to try it out. But for the first episode, we are going to be editing my dark and gloomy preset, and we're going to be using that to really show how to get deep greens, a very faded look to it with very little contrast and some highlights. And I'll walk you guys all through it through Lightroom and everything. And my actual link to the website and the link to download the preset is going to be in the description below. So if you guys are looking to just save some time rather than going through and doing it all yourself, you'll just be able to just pop the preset on. But anyways, let's get to it. So on here and everything, I do have some photos that I thought we could definitely go through and edit. Some of these I've already edited, so I know how they're going to turn out, but it's going to be one that you guys can see. So here's a picture I took of, it was just myself hiking and everything, and I thought I'd give it a 10-second delay and get out here and walk a bit. So you can see here and everything when I zoom in, the greens and everything are much stronger, very bright and vibrant greens. Down here and everything especially, you can see different colors of brown and everything and a bit of gray in there. So I'm just going to apply right away just to show you what the preset is going to look like. You can see here now I kind of try to keep the browns and greens to a bit more of a minimum, so there's not a bunch of shades. But especially up here you can notice that some of the greens are staying, some of the greens are much deeper, and that's something that I really wanted to go for in this, and I think it turned out really well. What we're going to do is we're going to go back to just going to the default settings. We're going to go into develop so we can actually get a hang at this thing. So the first thing that I wanted to do with this photo is if we're going to give it a dark theme, exposure is basically how bright or dark it is. So I want to lower the exposure just a tiny bit, not too much, but just a bit. So we'll do about 0.7 under. Now with contrast, if you bump contrast, you can see it really makes everything a lot deeper, but when you bring it back, it really almost makes them more neutral in how many greens you're going to be phasing with. So you could either do it like this, but I kind of stray away with it on this dark and gloomy one, so I'm going to go back and lower the contrast about 50. Highlights, then you're going to notice it up here more often. You can see where it really brightens up the sky. I actually bumped my highlights for this one, simply because if you darken it up, you can see it really gives it the weak look in the bridge. So I'm going to actually raise it up so you can see the bridge much better. Shadows then is a bit different. You can see shadows don't do much. It's really going to be a lot in the bridge. So I am going to actually lower the shadows just a bit, just so you can see a bit more pronounced. Whites, then that's another big impact. You can see here. Way too up, you can see it overexposes everything and it really looks like garbage. Lowering all the way down doesn't do much, really at all, because a lot of whites aren't even present, unless up here then, where I'll show you. You can see they get a little darker. So whites we're going to kind of leave alone, but I think I'm just going to drop them down just a bit, just so up there it gets a tiny bit darker. Barely noticeable, but it's going to make an impact in the long run. Blacks then are going to be a bigger impact. Overall, you can see that there's a lot happening with however I drag it on. So I'm actually going to bump up the blacks just a tiny bit. So as you can see here, there's a lot of drastic looks in here and everything, which is fine. Highlights and shadows don't do much, as you can see here, but it definitely is something that I always look for. Making sure that I always do all of them. Moving down to clarity, vibrance, and saturation. Clarity, actually, I bump down. I bring clarity down to about another 50. And I'll show you basically how I want to keep myself here really crisp and everything. But vibrance, then, I am going to bring the vibrance back up because you can see here it makes the shirt pop a bit more. So we're going to pop the vibrance just maybe 20 or so. Saturation, we're going to drop just a tiny bit. And then we're onto the tone curve now. So tone curve is basically where you can really drag along. You can see it gives you all these impacts, and you can make multiple points. What I like to do right in the beginning, this is something that I learned early on, is I like to press on every little corner like this. And it gives me 4 spots that I can really, 3 spots that I can really impact myself with. So in the bottom left one here, you can see it gives me that fade that I want, but we're gonna wait on that. I want to darken everything here. You can see how it darkens up the sides and everything a bit. But then as well, I want to basically drag this one down so it keeps the greens in itself. You don't want to have too many greens going. Then with this tone curve, there's not too much besides the fact that it's going to change the colors of the leaves. So I like to bring this guy basically up and then over a bit, up to here, and you can see it kind of just washes out the colors a bit. So then we'll go down here to this guy, and this is the guy where it's much more definitive on how much you want the fade and how much you think it looks good at. So all the way up is really when you get that huge fade and everything is wrong. So I'm going to bring it right to about here, I think. I think that looks good, yeah. And what you can, what was that? Okay. Another thing you can always do, you can always grab another point, everything, pull it down. But I think right there, actually a little lower is going to look fine. Perfect. Now, so we kind of went through everything, the very basics, tone curve and all the exposure and highlights and shadows and such. But there's still a lot of color, and that's something that I think that we want to avoid. So this is where we're going to get into saturation, luminance, and hue, and this is something that I haven't really touched much up until later years. Definitely is an impact. I highly recommend you guys actually play around with this, some of which you may not even really understand. I'm still trying to learn hue, but saturation I have pretty well down, so we're going to play with saturation a lot more than hue. Hue though, you can see if I think it's the green one, when I change the greens, you can see it takes whatever is green in the shot and you can change it to be brighter and give it also like an artificial look for fall. But then you can also impact it with yellow. So we're gonna stick with green. We're gonna give it just a darker green actually. And then with aquas, you can see here it gives just a bit of it right up here. You can see how it kind of changes. So we're gonna try to make these constant. So I'm gonna use up here as a reference. 2 blues, so we're gonna come back a bit, bring the aquas down. Blues, then you can see, just changes the color of my outfit and everything because it's really, the majority is blue. So I'm going to keep it right where it is, really. Saturation then. So this is the one that really is going to make your photos look dark and gloomy. Reds aren't going to do much, obviously, because there's no reds in the shot. Really, you're looking at what colors are here that you're trying to present. So there's a bit of yellow, very weak yellow and everything, but if you do lower it, you can see it does darken them just a tiny bit because there is a tiny tinge of yellow in the shot. The green is where you're going to notice it the most. You can see now when you edit the greens, all the greens become much weaker, much weaker. And that's something that dark and gloomy really presents. So I usually drop this down to about 65-ish, between 60 and 70. I think with this one we'll do about 60 on the dot. And you can see now the greens are very deep and everything. They almost look black and white, but you can still know that they're green. Blues, then you can see we're going to keep the blues. Actually, I'm going to bump the blues a bit, just a tiny bit, just so then it presents the subject a lot better. Purples, then really nothing much. Same with magenta, nothing much. So really whatever on those two. Luminance we're not even going to touch with on this. So those two are taken care of. So then we can go to, it's under effects, yes. So this is where you can go into your vignetting. You can see here, this is where you get that shadow right around the edge and everything. You see a lot of it on some certain social media posts. Some people really like using it. With this one, we're going to give it the slightest black vignette, just in the corners. Not too much, barely noticeable, but it's there. And then we're going to bring the midpoint down a bit, so it brings it in a little bit more. And then the roundness we can actually bring back a bit. And then the feather is basically, you can see where it actually kind of rounds it out. So we're going to just barely not even touch with it. So then let's move on to something that's a bit more opinionated to what you guys like. Grain is something that I think it definitely should be used in certain photography. It gives it a bit more of a retro and film look. I'm not the biggest user of it, just because a lot of what I shoot grain can really mess it up. But in this case and everything here, you can see what grain, it gives you that digital, that film, old retro kind of look. But I'm not even going to touch it in this one. I'm just going to let it do its thing. So now that we're done with that, we're going to move on to using some of these guys up here. Now this guy right here, this is up to you with your photos. This one I am going to use for this one. You can see here and here, I want to match these guys up so it's very centered. So I'm going to pull this guy and use my box to see, okay, is it matched up? So it's an option you can choose, is to either match it up here, or you can match it up with the subject, which is me right here in the center. I think personally, I'm going to use the center and call her there, because I think that looks good. Because the subject is me, not the bridge. So then what we're going to do is we're going to use the adjustment brush at the moment. And we're going to zoom in here. It actually lets me zoom in. Okay, it's not letting me zoom in, I'll just press in, that's fine. We're going to take the brush now. We can use my brackets on the keyboard and make this bigger or smaller. And what we're going to do here now is, this is basically, it's going to look the exact same with whatever you do with it. Oh, my saturation de-aging is lowered. It's going to look the exact same, whatever you do with it. So for this one, what we're going to do is actually we're going to increase clarity, and that's it. We just want to keep me having a clear look to it. It'll brighten up some of the skin tones and everything. But that's all we're going to do. It's not much of a notice, but it's something that I always recommend. If there are certain things that aren't popping that much, definitely add them in. And then you can always go through and really bump it up. Now my keyboard works. Okay. So we can press out of it now, just like that. And you can see there, I'll show you what it does. You can press the little icon right there. You can see now, really gives that pronounced look, especially in like the elbows and everything and the legs. You can see what it really helps out. So then we're going to move on to using the graduated filters right here and everything. And what these are is you can really do the same exact thing. So I'll just do an example. Lower saturation all the way. It gives it a black and white look on the side and everything, wherever I pull this line to. But I'm going to not use that. So we're not going to make it black and white. We're going to keep the saturation right where it is. What we are going to lower is the exposure. I want my subject here to be really focused. So I'm going to pull some of these guys over. And you can see here now, it darkens each side. Not much, but enough. Because if I darken it too much, you can see it really gives away from it. So I want to keep some details. So we're going to still lower it a bit. We're bringing it right there to about 1.5. Perfect. So now you can see here, really, we do have the look that we were going for of dark and gloomy. We're basically there. One thing that you could always look at though doing is going back then to just your your tone curve, and now after everything, messing with it. I've come to doing that pretty often, and I think with this one actually it is going to come true that I want to actually increase the fade just a tiny bit, right to there I think. So that really, I think I like that. I think really the subject is in focus and everything. The crop looks good. The greens are really deep how I wanted them. I think this is a good photo. I think we're good with this one. So really in the end we can see that, we'll compare the two. So really it's not much different. The only thing really different is the exposure, and you can see right there, besides that it's really the exact same. Maybe some darker exposures on the side, but other than that you have the exact same photo. So that's something for thought right there. I'll show you the before and after once again. That's not the reference photo. Where is it? This is the photo I want. Wow, what is going on? There we go. Okay. So you can see here now before and after. We turn this into this in no time at all. Now granted, I've been doing this for years, so I have a lot of experience with this. For those who are really just getting into photography or really editing photos, this is something that's going to take a lot more time and a lot more experimenting. But it is something that you do have to spend time on, and it is such a valuable lesson to learn. So the next thing we're going to do in everything, I think we'll do one more. Let's do something that's not person. Let's do, I gotta have one in here we can do. Okay, let me reset this one. So you can see here everything. This one's a bit more straightforward. But you can see here I focused right on these little berries right here and everything. I thought this was a little cool thing with the plants. And I really wanted the berries colors to stay, but the greens to be really dark still. So let's go back here to this guy and let's just reset it. So same thing really as we kind of were doing before and everything. Exposure is going to come down just a tiny bit. I'll keep the reference photo up for this one so you can see what is impacting and everything as we go through. So exposure is going to be lowered a bit. Contrast with this one I'm going to raise. Reason being is because I want the berries outlines to be really pronounced and strong. Weaken it up like this and you can see it doesn't do much, but I want that outline to be really crisp. Highlights then, we are going to bump it up just to give the edge of the leaves some effect. Shadows then, they aren't going to do much. It's really just going to be down here where it's out of focus. Your whites then, you can see here when you brighten it up and everything, it's going to make a big of an impact. So I'm going to keep my whites just a tiny bit above the default. Blacks, then you can see here, same thing. It's going to take the darker spots and really affect them. So I'm going to bring them up just a tiny bit. Clarity then, same thing. You can really play with it if you want. You can either bring it down or bring it all the way up. I think with this one it looks cooler that it's up. And then vibrance, I'm going to bring this guy up to about 50-ish right there. And then keep the saturation just a tiny bit lower. So you can see here and everything, the berries still are really in focus, but the toes are just starting to get a bit deeper in green. So we'll wait on tone curve. I think let's go straight to saturation. So now that the berries are red in our reference photo, we're actually going to use red and we're going to bump the reds up. So you can see here it really messes with them. And that's perfect how pronounced they were in the shot. So I'm going to bring this up a fair amount actually. But then you can see some yellow in there, so we're going to bring down the yellows just a tiny bit. And the greens, again, drop them a ton. After dropping greens, you may notice that, okay, the berries are really red for my liking. So don't be afraid to drop them a bit. It's all personal to you guys. I think I dropped the greens a tiny bit too much. In the leaves, then you're going to notice here sometimes you're going to have some of those blues and greens, or some blues and aquas. So feel free to drop the blues and aquas a bit. That can help. So then let's get to the tone curve. Tone curve isn't going to be nearly as much this time, except maybe bringing up the fade just a bit. But we're going to bring it up just a tiny bit like that, I think. We'll bring this guy up even a little bit more so it gives that pronounced contrast that we're looking for with them. And then the fade, just a tiny bit. Now we could do something with graduated filters. However, with a shot like this, and we already know what the subject is right here in the center, I don't think it's necessary. I just don't. So that really, I think, is going to call it for that photo. So we have this photo right here that we did, and we have this photo right here that we did. If it would ever load. There we go. So yeah, these two photos are really, really well done. I think for doing in about 15 to 20 minutes. Definitely something that I think we can really work ourselves into my Instagram theme. But you can see with all the shots that I've taken, everything, they actually will work by just applying the preset. For example, this shot I did yesterday, all I did really as an impact for it, I'll apply the theme right away. All I did was just bump the temperature, and that temperature really makes a difference. Besides that, there's not much else to it. That's something that's really cool about this theme, is that since the green is the main color that you're editing, you can play with the temperature a lot, and that really gives you the freedom to give it a bit more of a vibrant look or a bit of a brighter look, yet still having that darker feel to it. And I think that's something that this really brings off well. Same with a photo, for example, like, where else could we have one? Something like this, for example, same thing. Dark and gloomy right applied, you can see greens are very deep and everything. Still a bit of aqua in there, something that I may have to adjust. But then if I just bump the temperature up, you can see here, brings them down a bit. Path is a bit more vibrant, but it still looks really good. So I think that right there calls it and everything for this episode. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comments, or just messaging me through my website, one of my social media platforms, which I will link as well. Like I said, it's definitely going to be a work in progress these next couple months and everything with all these episodes that I'm going to be putting out. But it is something that I have wanted to try, and I hope that you guys do enjoy these videos, and I do hope you learn something. I understand that a lot of people that do follow my content on my website or my social media is just for the pleasure of seeing my photos, but there are people that I know that will benefit from this. So really, in the end, I just want to say thank you guys for watching. I hope you learned something, and I'll get back to you guys with the next episode soon.